Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into the mists of early morning, your breath soft against the chilled air. You're standing at the edge of something ancient, something quietly alive. Before you, narrow canals twist through green, floating patches of land gardens that shimmer in the watery dawn like dreams still not fully awake. These are chinampas, the great floating gardens of the Aztecs, built not on land, but coaxed from the shallows of Lake Xochimilco with a kind of earthy sorcery. Mud, reeds, and sticks woven together again and again until whole farms float atop a lake like lazy rafts of food. Water laps quietly beneath your sandals. The scent of damp soil, crushed mint, and last night's rain is thick in the air. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls high and sharp-hand. A canoe thuds softly into a dock of woven reeds. You kneel and drag your fingers through the damp black soil, still warm from yesterday's sun. And just like that, your morning begins, not in a kitchen, but in the middle of a swamp that feeds an empire. You probably won't survive this, by the way, between the altitude, the sun, and the lake's mosquitoes. It's honestly a miracle anyone grows up here, let alone farms. But still, here you are, half asleep, hungry, and ready to whisper sweet nothings to a handful of beans. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop your city and the local time in the comments. Maybe someone else is drifting off with you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You reach for your digging stick, a simple tool cut from local hardwood and polished smooth by generations of calloused hands. Around you, other gardeners are already at work, their low voices humming through the mist like a lullaby of survival. Some are whispering greetings to their corn stalks. One man claps twice before stepping onto his chinampa like he's knocking politely on the door of the earth. And it's not superstition. It's not entirely. Here, in this soggy green maze, every plot of land is not just a food source, it's an ancestor, a spirit, a living being. You don't just dig into it. You ask permission. You greet it like an old friend. And sometimes, if you forget to be polite, the beans won't grow. The chinampas stretch on for miles, like puzzle pieces floating on the lake. They not really floating not in the way boats do, but they rebuilt with such care that they rise and fall slightly with the water, breathing with it. Each one is staked down at the corners by a woat tree stall, spindly willows whose roots help hold the floating land together. Their shade keeps the soil moist and the crops content. Your own plot is modest, about the size of a basketball court, though you've never seen one. On it, you've planted rows of beans, corn, and squashes, sometimes called the Three Sisters. They like to be together. The corn grows tall, the beans climb the corn, and the squash spreads low, covering the ground and keeping weeds down. It's like a plant support group. No one grows alone out here. Historians still argue whether the chinampa system originated with the Xochimilco people or was developed earlier by groups around Lake Calco. But what matters to you is that it works. This land, once marsh and open lake, is now thick with food, enough to feed the hungry mouths of Tenochtitlan, the empire's capital, just a short canoe ride away. You'll head there tomorrow with your haul if the beans approve. You pause now, watching a duck paddle past with one leg. Just one, the other seems permanently tucked up, like it's on break. The duck stares at you for a moment, unimpressed, and paddles on. You whisper good morning to your beans. You ask them how they slept. You promise them shade, water, and gentle hands. Because here's the thing, Aztec gardeners really did talk to their plants. Not just as a quirky habit, but as part of their relationship with the world. To grow food, you had to honor the food. And if that meant a morning chat with legumes, so be it. There's a saying passed down in the fields here. If you insult the earth will insult your belly. It's a polite way of saying, you'll starve, buddy. So people mind their manners even with roots and vines. The air grows warmer now, and the mist begins to lift. A boat glides past, the farmer inside slathering white paste onto his nose. It smells vaguely of flowers and fish. That's the sunscreen, made from crocodile dung and herbs. Supposedly, it protects your skin and wards off jealous spirits. You consider trying some, but decide your dignity deserves a break today. You begin the day's first task, repairing the canal edge where yesterday's rain collapsed part of the bank. It's mucky work, thick with black mud that oozes between your fingers like half-set pudding. You pile sticks, weave reeds through them, and press lake bottom muck into place, packing it tight. It holds for now. You sit back on your heels, breathing hard. Your hands are black. Your nose is itchy. Your beans still aren't talking back. In the distance, the capital city looms Tenochtitlan, glittering on its island like something carved from obsidian and gold. It floats like a mirage, connected to the mainland by great causeways, its temples rising into the sky. Over 200,000 people live there, depending on your muddy little garden. No pressure. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the frogs sing loud enough to rattle your teeth, you think about what it means to feed a city. How one scoop of mud, one carefully planted seed, ripples outward. The emperor himself may taste your squash. Priests may offer your corn in ceremonies. A child you'll never meet may grow up strong from your beans. You shift in the dirt, suddenly aware that your stomach is growling, and reach for the cold tamale you tucked in a leaf. It's squashed, slightly soggy, and still the best thing you'll eat today. A neighbor rose up, trading gossip for seeds. Apparently, someone's plot to the south has been cursed 3 seasons with poor yields. And now the gardener swears he hears laughter in the night. You nod solemnly, trying not to look like you're already planning to row by and eavesdrop tonight. Just before midday, a breeze picks up, stirring the willow leaves and sending shivers through your crops. You pause and watch the movement, how the shadows dance across your squash leaves like tiny, wriggling ghosts. You think of the old stories, how some believe the wind carries voices from the underworld, how certain gusts are messages, not weather. Of course, others think that's nonsense. Practical farmers laugh at the idea of wind whispers and bean conversations. A seed needs water, not compliments, they say. But here in the Chinampas, where your plot floats between the living world and the deep dark lake below, you hedge your bets. You give your compliments anyway. The sun is high now. Your back is sore. The beans are growing, even if they're still giving you the silent treatment. You splash your face with water from the canal clean enough. If you don't think about it tanned, stretch out beside your favorite willow. Above you, a dragonfly buzzes like a wind-up toy. Beside you, the squash blossoms glow like little golden bells. The land may be ancient, the work exhausting, and the gods occasionally grumpy, but for now. Here in the warm hush of midday, everything feels exactly right. The garden breathes with you, and somewhere in the soil, a bean stirs, listening. The water is warm now, just enough to curl your toes as you step off your chinampa into the canoe. The boat rocks slightly, just enough to make you second-guess your balance. You steady yourself with the paddle-long worn smooth at the handle. And smelling faintly of lakeweed, begin the gentle push across the canal. Your destination. A neighbor's plot just a few rows away, where the best compost heap in the whole district is rumored to steam even in the cool of morning. The water ripples as your paddle slices through, and dragonflies dart beside you like gossiping arrows. You pass another farmer, this one balancing a baby on her hip, while using her other hand to weed a row of chili plants. She doesn't wave her hands are full bud, she gives you the nod. The "we're in this muck together" nod. You nod back, a shared understanding between swamp siblings. You coast up to the compost heap like it's a prized temple. It doesn't look impressive, just a sunken, lumpy pile of browning leaves, bird droppings, old squash rinds, and something that's either a fish skeleton or a bad omen. But here in the Chinampa system, this heap is liquid gold, or rather, mushy gold. It feeds the soil, keeps the beans talking, and might just ward off whatever bad mojo that cursed garden to the south. You scoop up a heaving pile with your hands. It's warm, squishy, and smells like something you shouldn't admit. Smells kind of nice. The warmth means it's alive, breaking down and turning into future food. You pile it into a woven basket and tuck it into your canoe, where it immediately begins leaking through the bottom. Nature doesn't care about your clean boat. As you paddle back, your mind drifts to the bigger picture. These Chinampas aren't just floating veggie patches, they're the lifeblood of Tenochtitlan. At its peak, the city's population rivaled European capitals, and it didn't get that big by nibbling on air. Chinampa farming, with its uncanny productivity, allowed the Aztecs to feed an entire empire from a lake. This is swamp agriculture at its most elite. The secret lies in the soil lore, more specifically, the way the soil is layered. The farmers dig up nutrient-rich muck from the lake bottom and layer it with plant material, fish remains, and compost, creating soil that stays fertile season after season. Some say the same patch of earth can produce 7 harvests a year. 7, you barely manage to keep your aloe plant alive. And the layout. The layout? These aren't random chunks of floating land. They're arranged in grids, neat as a game board. Canals weave between them like streets, allowing farmers to boat their goods right to market. If farming were a sport, the Chinampas would be the championship stadium. But back to you, hauling your leaking compost like it's treasure. You reach your own garden and begin to spread it carefully, reverently, as though it's a blessing. Which, in this world, it sort of is. Each scoop is a promise of beans to come. You hum while you work. Not a tune you recognize, but something that rises up naturally when your hands are in the earth. Somewhere behind you, a child shouts. You turn to see a group of kids paddling a canoe with what looks like a broom and a ladle. One of them is holding up a large, muddy fish and grinning like he just won the lottery. You grin back. Childhood here means mud between your toes, secret fishing spots, and trying not to fall in the canal when your paddle is actually a spoon. Once the compost is spread and your hands are sticky with whatever that fish skeleton was, you sit back and admire your handiwork. It's a quiet kind of pride, the kind that only comes when you rebone tired, but the garden looks back at you and says, yeah, we're good. You remember your first season. You'd planted too shallow, watered too much, and forgot to chant over the squash. The result? Limp leaves, beans that sulked in the dirt, and a neighbor who politely suggested you try raising ducks instead. But you learned. You watched the old-timers, copied their methods, even stole a chant or two from the guy who swore his tomatoes responded to compliments. Historians still argue whether the Chinampas were more efficient than modern agriculture. Some say yes, pointing to the yield per acre and the minimal environmental impact. Others say it's romanticized, that the lakes couldn't have supported such a massive network forever. But here, today, in this patch of garden you've shaped with your own 2 hands, the argument feels far away. All that matters is whether the beans come up. You break for a midday snack, tortillas wrapped around mashed avocado and a sprinkle of salt from the market. It's basic, but it tastes like a banquet when eaten under the shade of an ahwot tree, toes dipped in cool canal water. A pair of ducks paddle by, clearly hoping you'll drop something. You don't. The ducks don't leave. By now, the sun has shifted, casting golden stripes through the willow branches. You pull out your digging stick again and start thinning the rows of corn, making space for the beans to stretch. Each plant gets checked, each leaf inspected. You whisper encouragement like a coach with a very leafy team. The work is rhythmic: dig, thin, pat down, move on. You start to feel like part of the garden, as if the rows breathe with you. There's a kind of peace here that you can explain to someone who never spent all day with mud on their knees and sunlight on their back. Even the itchy bites from lake insects start to feel, well, not good, but tolerable. like small, annoying love taps from nature. Then the sound, a long, low honk, like someone dropped a conch into a foghorn. You look up, It's one of the city canoes, massive, flat-bottomed, filled with market workers on their way to Tenochtitlan. They pass you slowly, waving. One man shouts, "Got any squash for trade?" You shout back. Not until they start singing. He laughs. It's an old joke by now that your squash needs music to grow. But the truth is, you're not entirely sure he's wrong. As the sun starts to sink toward the western rim of the lake, shadows stretch long across the chinampas. You stand and stretch, your back cracking like a dry tortilla. Your hands are streaked with green and brown, your knees damp. And your hair carries the perfume of leaf smoke, lake water, and something wonderfully sour you can't quite place. You load up the canoe with today's harvest, nothing huge, just a few baskets of beans, a handful of peppers, and a pridefully symmetrical squash. Tomorrow you'll head to the market, maybe sell them, maybe trade them for salt, cloth, or those little honey cakes your cousin keeps bragging about. You look back at your garden one last time. It's quiet now. The ducks have wandered off. The dragonflies have given up buzzing. The beans stand tall, whispering secrets you're not meant to hear. But you whispered to them first, and somehow, you know they heard you. Your garden greets you early again, just as the sky begins to blush with the promise of another humid day. The air is damp and velvet thick, draped over your shoulders like a warm, invisible shawl. You step barefoot across the planks that lead to your chinampa, pausing just for a second to murmur a sleepy good morning to the squash blossoms, which always seem to bloom just a little brighter when you acknowledge them. You don't question it anymore. The beans, in particular, like to be flattered. You crouch beside the rows of young bean plants. Their tendrils have curled in perfect spirals around their corn companions, reaching upward with a kind of botanical hope. You lay a gentle hand near one stem and lean close, whispering, "You're doing great. Keep climbing." Why talk to the beans? You ask yourself, though you already know the answer. Everyone talks to them. It's not a superstition, it's protocol, tradition, and as it sounds, it works. Your grandmother used to say, if you don't ask the beans first, they won't give you their secrets. She'd kneel in the soil every planting day, whispering words so low you thought they were spells. Maybe they were, because her beans always grew tall, strong, sweet. Not just food, but companions. Beans with opinions. The belief goes like this. Each plant has a spirit, or tonali, something like a spark of identity. When you speak to a plant, you're not just making noise, you're waking it up, reminding it of its purpose. You're asking permission to share the soil, to take from the earth what the plant has gathered. It's respect in the same way you'd greet a guest or thank a host. And the beans, they're known to be particular. Not as proud as the corn, which demands songs and dances. Not as moody as the chili, which can wither in spite if mistreated. But the beans, they're chatty. If you know how to listen, you find the one you call Teppo after your cousin who always needed encouragement. Teppo the bean vine is halfway up its support stick, wavering like it's not sure if it should keep going. You crouch down and give it your most motivational whisper. Look at you. Halfway already. Keep going. I'm rooting for you. You swear the leaf twitches in response. Historians still argue whether this practice speaking to plants was purely symbolic or part of a larger spiritual framework. Some think it was tied to Nahua cosmology, where every object had life and power. Others say it was psychologically an early form of crop mindfulness, if you will. But on mornings like this, kneeling beside a shy bean vine while the lake slowly wakes up, the debate feels irrelevant. You talk to the plants because it feels right. And somehow, they listen. A neighbor rows past, her canoe filled with squash and flowers. She raises an eyebrow and teases, "You sweet-talking those beans again." You grin and nod. They're shy this week. She snorts, "Mine are stubborn." might need to bribe them with chili smoke. And just like that, she disappears around a bend in the canal, leaving behind a wake of ripples and a few loose petals. You return to your work, moving gently down the rows, murmuring encouragement, compliments, the occasional complaint about mosquitoes. The mosquitoes do not deserve compliments. Then comes the composting ritual. You've set aside a special mix for the beans: lake mud, rich in algae, crushed flower petals for softness, and a sprinkle of ash from last night's fire. It's not official science, but you swear it gives them heart. You pat the mixture gently around each stem like you're retucking the plants into bed in reverse. From a distance, someone is playing a wooden flutes, circular melodies that loop like warm waves. The music rides across the water, through the fields, between the rows of corn and squash, curling around your ankles and into your lungs. It smells like smoke and early sunlight, and you feel it settling into your bones like a lullaby. Some farmers play music intentionally, believing it stirs the plants awake, that it makes the leaves softer, the pods fuller. One man down the canal swears his tomatoes only ripen when he sings to them. He's tone deaf. But the tomatoes don't seem to mind. You pause at a bare patch one corner of your plot where the beans just didn't sprout. The soil looks fine, but it's quiet. You kneel, press your palm into the dirt, and close your eyes. It's warm, still, as if waiting. You whisper, "What happened here?" Then, softer, "I'm listening." Nothing stirs, but somehow you feel heard. You reach for your seed pouch stitched from maguey fiber and smudged with years of soil and breath. Inside, a handful of smooth, dark beans await. You choose 3, the way your grandmother taught you. One for the earth, one for the sky, one for what you do not understand. You plant them carefully, spacing them with your thumb, patting the earth gently afterward like sealing a secret. The sun climbs higher, bringing a slow shimmer to the water, and a chorus of buzzes from insects who apparently missed the "let us sleep" memo. You wipe sweat from your brow and tilt your head back, looking at the sky. Big, blue, open like the whole world might be resting just above you, listening to you whisper to your beans. There's a story you remember now, one the old men tell when they had too much pook. About a gardener who forgot to ask permission from his plants. He planted fast, carelessly. He cursed when the squash scratched his arms. He never sang, never thanked. And when the harvest came, nothing. Just a single fat bean sitting in the middle of his plot. He boiled it, ate it, and the next day disappeared. Some say he turned into a weevil. Others say the earth swallowed him to teach him manners. You smile because you know it's not just a bedtime tale. It's a reminder. The garden watches you. It remembers. You finish your rounds, then pour a scoop of lake water at the base of each plant. Carefully, slowly, not just hydration offering. A morning cup of tea for your leafy companions. Then, because you're feeling bold, you hum a tune. Something soft and rhythmic, half remembered from childhood. The melody dances along the row, curling into the leaves. A butterfly lands on your shoulder like approval. And just as you're finishing, the oddest thing happens. You swear that one of the bean pods wiggles, not the wind, not a bird, a tiny, deliberate shimmy. You blink, look again. Nothing. Just a perfectly still plant, basking in the sun like a cat with a secret. You whisper, "I saw that." No response. Of course not. But you smile, because even if they never speak back, you know they're listening. The squash is sulking again. You squint at it sprawled out like a lazy cat across the edge of the chinampa. Its leaves flopped dramatically in all directions, sigh. Not wilted, not sick. Just dramatic, the kind of plant that always acts like it's been personally offended by the sun. You kneel beside it and run your fingers gently over the soft fuzz of its stem. You know, you mutter, the beans don't pull this kind of nonsense. A leaf twitches. You roll your eyes. Of course it did. You glance over at the corn tall, proud, unbothered. It stretches toward the sky like it's rehearsing for a mural. The beans cling to it in spirals, winding up and around the stalks with quiet determination. The squash sprawls beneath them all, flat and broad, forming a living carpet that keeps the weeds out and the soil moist. This trio corn, beans, squashes called milpa, the sisterhood of the field. And like real siblings, they don't always get along. The corn is the older sister. Bossy takes up space, never asks for help. The beans are the middle child. Quiet, clever, a little clingy. And the squash, oh, she's the youngest, dramatic and messy, but somehow still necessary. Without her broad leaves shading the soil, the sun would parch everything. Without her roots, the ground wouldn't stay cool. Without her blossoms, the bugs would wander off in search of better gossip. You learned early on not to separate them. Together, they balance each other nutritionally, structurally, even spiritually. The corn gives the beans a spine to climb. The beans fix nitrogen into the soil, feeding the corn and the squash. She keeps everything grounded. Literally, historians still argue whether this companion planting method developed intentionally or evolved over centuries through trial and error. But the results speak for themselves. A perfect plant partnership that doesn't just survive. It thrives especially in these watery chinampa beds where every inch of soil matters. You lean back on your heels and watch the garden breathe. Corn stalks swaying like dancers, beans fluttering like nervous scribes, and the squash. Well, the squash is just there, being dramatic, but useful. You remember, not for the first time, how your grandmother told stories about these crops like they were family. Corn was your grandfather, proud and tall, with deep roots and a booming laugh. Beans were your uncle, skinny, clever, always eavesdropping, and squash, your youngest cousin, the one who cried when no one looked at her and then stole your tamale when you weren't paying attention. It's not just metaphor. In Aztec cosmology, these plants were living beings each with its own spirit and its own responsibilities. You didn't just grow them, you hosted them, you kept them happy. And, like any complicated dinner party, you had to manage their personalities. You reach down and gently lift one of the squash blossoms, wide and golden, edges curling like the corners of a sleepy smile. It smells faintly of honey and lake mist. You whisper to it, "You're not fooling anyone. I know you're fine." In response, a bee buzzes out of the blossom and nearly headbutts your nose. You fall backward into the soft soil with a grunt. "Okay," you mutter, brushing dirt off your elbows. Message received. You lie there a moment, watching the sun flicker through the awwood leaves above you. Their long, narrow branches sway gently in the breeze, casting striped shadows across your garden. It's almost beautiful enough to forgive the bee. Almost. From this angle, lying among the squash vines like a particularly relaxed scarecrow. You notice something? A new shoot pushing out from the beans. Pale green and coiled tight, it unfurls slowly, reaching toward the corn. Like a tiny hand stretching for comfort. You smile. Family dynamics, but in plant form. Somewhere across the canal, a flute begins again. This one's different, sharper, faster. You sit up, ears perking. That tune is for the sun. A wake-up song played for the crops to energize them, or so the elders say. You hum along as you rise, feeling the rhythm in your bones, in the soil, even in the air. You weren't raised believing the plants could hear music. But these days, you're not so sure. There's a patch of weeds creeping into your southern rosenicky little things with spindly stems and tiny, innocent flowers. You frown and tug one free, holding it up like it's on trial. You say to the weed, "Are not invited." You get to work, gently pulling the invaders and tucking them into a compost basket. As you do, you talk. Not to yourself, heaven forbid anyone think that, but to the plants. The corn gets compliments on its posture. The beans receive encouragement for their tenacity. The squash gets a mildly exasperated pep talk. By the time you finish, the garden looks better, tidier, balanced. And then, as if to punctuate your efforts, one of the corn stalks releases a single golden tassel that drifts lazily into the air, like confetti after a show. You feel absurdly proud. Of course, not every farmer treats the plants like family. Some are more transactional. They plant, they water, they harvest. No talking, no music. No tiny pep talks whispered between chores. You've tried that method. It works, technically, but it feels hollow, like cooking a tamale without singing while you stir. One old man, your neighbor, 3 plots over, claims his garden is the quietest in the region. Not one word, he boasts. The plants know their job. You've seen his beans, stiff, unhappy, grown, yes, but joyless, like beans with a midlife crisis. Plants, you've decided, deserve more. Midday approaches and you rest again, this time in the shade of the tallest corn stalk. You watch the way the beans lean against it, wrapping like ribbons around a maypole. The squash, now done with its morning tantrum, has begun blooming in earnest. 5 golden blossoms open like sleepy eyes. You whisper a thank you to them all, just in case they're listening. They always are. Then, just as you're about to pack up, you notice a small footprint bare, muddy, and definitely not yours, pressed into the edge of your garden. You frown. It's small, child-sized. You glance around, nothing. No rustle of reeds. No splash of retreating feet. Just that one perfect print. A visitor, a prankster, a spirit. You crouch beside it and whisper, "Next time, at least say hello." You pat the earth beside the print, smoothing it gently, and leave a bean there, just in case. You're ankle deep in what can only be described as soggy heaven. It squelches, it clings. It smells like wet dreams and yesterday's stew. You reach down, scoop up a handful, and let the lake bottom muck slide slowly through your fingers. It's dark, almost black, with streaks of green algae and little bits of who knows what glinting in the sunlight. If rich soil had a perfume, this would be it. Earthy, sharp, oddly sweet. And with just a whisper of old fish. This is the secret sauce of the Chinampa world. Mud and magic. You're out here today dredging the bottom of the canal, gathering silt and decayed water plants to refresh your garden beds. It's one of those tasks that sounds simple until your back starts groaning and your arms feel like bean vines trying to pull away from your body. Still, it's oddly satisfying. It's like spoon-feeding the garden. You heave another scoop of muck into your canoe and wipe your brow with the edge of your sleeve. The sky is already bright, the sun reflecting off the canal's surface like a mirror trying to blind you. Somewhere behind you, someone is laughing on. You can smell the smoke from a fire, hear the flap of laundry being wrung out against a rock. The Chinampa community is wide, but it's never lonely. Your neighbor, old Ixco, calls out from across the canal. You using flower ash this time. You nod and lift your basket of powdered petals and burned stems, marigold and chili stalks. He whistles, impressed. You trying to make the beans fall in love with you? You grin. They're already flirting. You're not joking. Because here, in this patchwork of floating gardens and careful traditions, even compost is courtship. Take the bird droppings, for example. You don't just sprinkle any old guano, you pick the right kind. Cormorants, if you can get it. Pelican, maybe. Duck, Sutli, especially if the ducks are from the sacred canal down by the shrine. It's said their droppings are richer, more fertile, more spiritually attuned. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs understood the chemical balance of compost, whether they knew that the nitrates and phosphorus in bird droppings helped the soil thrive, or if it was all instinct and observation. But you suspect it doesn't matter. They knew. They might not have used lab coats, but their hands knew things science is still catching up to. And then there's the flower ash. Remember the first time your grandmother let you help make it? She scattered bright petals mostly into the fire with a whisper. "This gives the garden dreams," she said. It remembers the color. The ashes were cool by morning, gray and fine, and she sifted them into a gourd bowl like she was measuring medicine. You sprinkle the same ashes now around the base of your corn, careful not to let the wind steal any. You shift in your canoe and reach into the next basket, this one filled with rotting water weeds, thick and stringy. You pull out a strand and wince. It smells like it's done trying to be a plant. You grin anyway. The water weeds are a gift from the lake. They grow fast, soak up sunlight, and die with enthusiasm. You gather them, let them rot just long enough to get gooey, and then fold them back into the soil. A cycle of generosity and decay. The Chinampa way. You remember another fringe trick you've seen used only by the bold or the slightly unhinged. Fish heads. Buried at the edge of the garden beds, left to rot in secret, they're said to bring strength to the squash and vision to the beans. Whether that's true or just old farmer superstition, you don't know. But one plot down the canal always has squash the size of your head. Coincidence, probably. But you filed the idea away anyway. Back on land, you haul basket after basket of muck, ash, and rotted plants into your Chinampa and begin layering them like a cake only a worm could love. Muck on the bottom, weeds in the middle, a sprinkle of ash on top, and then a moment of silence. You pause. Place your hand flat on the soil. "Here's your breakfast," you whisper. Don't say I never treat you. A breeze rustles the awote leaves. The squash plant you scolded yesterday seems to stretch slightly, as if reconsidering its attitude. You nod, satisfied. There's a philosophy among Chinampa farmers. You don't grow food. You nurture a system. It's not about forcing things from the soil. It's about creating a space where everything helps everything else. Where ducks fertilize, trees hold banks together, water nourishes, and even rot becomes rebirth. You hum as you work. The kind of hum that doesn't have a melody so much as a rhythm. Scoop, spread, pat, whisper. Scoop again. The air is filled with the scent of fresh lake mud and the faint sweetness of crushed marigold. It's almost hypnotic. And then, as always, the bugs arrive. First the midges, then the bigger ones, the ones that hover directly in front of your nose like they got questions. You wave them away. They hover closer. One lands on your ear. You grumble. This is the price of working with magic mud. The insects know quality compost when they smell it. You light a twist of dried chili stem and wave the smoke around your shoulders. The bugs retreat, grumbling. You found that a little spice in the air keeps more than just mosquitoes at bay. Even the crows seem to give you more respect when you reek of chili fire. As you pause to drink from your clay jug lake water, boiled, filtered through charcoal and cactus pulp, you notice something by your corn row. A tiny mushroom, pale and glistening, has sprung up overnight. You lean in, eyebrows raised. This is a good sign. Some believe these small fungi are messengers from the under-earth. When they appear, it means the spirits of the soil are pleased. You whisper a soft thank you and resist the urge to boop it gently on the cap. You think back to last season when nothing grew quite right. The compost smelled sour. The beans refused to climb. The squash wilted at the slightest breeze. That was the year you tried the shortcut: less muck, no flower ash, and certainly no fish heads. You just didn't have the energy, and the earth noticed. That harvest was stingy. The corn was short. The beans tasted. Ungrateful, you learned your lesson. Compost isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's conversation. It's a promise that you won't take without giving. Every handful you spread today is a little thank you note to the earth. The sun dips lower as the afternoon matures. The air smells warmer now. the way stone smells after it's been sitting in sunlight all day. You stretch your back, bones creaking, and take one last look at your freshly dressed garden. It looks different. Not greener, exactly, but brighter, fuller, like the soil is smiling under its new blanket of muck and magic. You pack your tools, tucking away the empty baskets and shaking compost from your sleeves. As you turn to go, you catch a glimpse of movement, a dragonfly darting between the beans and corn, hovering for a moment above the squash. It lands on one leaf, still as a prayer. You whisper, "You're welcome to stay," because even the bugs know. This garden is loved. You wake up to the sound of frogs. Not polite, distant frogs. No, these are loud, dramatic, full-chested frogs who have clearly appointed themselves as the morning's official trumpet section. You groan, roll over on your sleeping mat, and swat vaguely at the air like it's the frog's fault you forgot to shutter the window reed. Sigh. The chinampas are still wrapped in early mist. It rolls low and slow across the canals, clinging to the soil like it's not ready to let go of the night. You pull on your work tunic, stretch until your joints pop like drying corn husks, and step out into the haze. Today's task is part agriculture, part architecture, reinforcing the chinampa edges. See, the gardens float, but not really. They rest atop shallow lake beds, anchored by layers of mud, reeds, and sticks, and held together by the roots of strategically planted trees. Without maintenance, those edges would erode, crumble, and if you're really unlucky, collapse dramatically while you're mid-weeding, leaving you and your prize squash floating in different directions. So you start the day with your hands full of sticks. Long, flexible ones from the awot tree, your favorite ally in this watery world. You press them into the edges of your chinampa, deep into the squelchy black border where water meets soil. Then comes the weaving reeds and brush layered horizontally through the vertical stakes like a mat. You press lake muck between the slats, sealing them with gentle, squishy pressure. It's like making a very dirty, very wet lasagna. As you work, you think of the people who did this before you. Your father, his aunt, that great uncle who disappeared in a canoe and allegedly returned as a talking turtle. That last part might be an exaggeration, but the turtle did follow your grandmother around for years. This is what you do when your farm is a raft. Strengthen the borders, keep it all from slipping back into the lake. Historians still argue whether the Aztec chinampa system developed all at once or evolved over centuries, layer by mucky layer. Some say it was a master stroke of engineering. Others believe it was born from slow, generational wisdom, like a great communal experiment in making land from water. But standing here, elbow deep in the sticky guts of your own floating island, you suspect it was both. And more. You pause to sit back against a willow trunk, sipping water and massaging your wrists. The tree leans over you like a patient elder, its long, stringy leaves brushing your shoulder. You planted this one yourself, back when your chinampa was younger. You remember it being no taller than your chest, its roots barely a whisper in the muck. Now it's firm, rooted, holding your corner together with the strength of something ancient. Willows the awotar, sacred here, not in the grand temple burning incense sense, but in the everyday kind of holy. Their roots prevent erosion. Their shade cools the soil. Their leaves feed ducks. Their branches become walls, fences, paddles, even toys. One child down the canal once made a flute from a hollow willow stick. It only played one note, but she insisted it summoned fish. You pick up a long branch that snapped during a windstorm last week. It's already half-dried, perfect for patching a tool handle. You rub your thumb along the bark and whisper your thanks. That's another rule of the chinampa life. Always thank the tree, especially the willow. Some folks say the willows remember not just how you treat them, but how you treat the land. Disrespect one chinampa and the next might sink a little when you step on it. Cut a tree without asking, and your squash might come up bitter. Coincidence? Maybe. But you're not taking chances. As you reinforce another border, mud squishing between your toes, a neighbor boats by with a suspicious bundle of sticks. You squint. That better not be fresh-cut awot. He looks insulted. What do you take me for? This is driftwood, totally unrelated to that fallen sapling downriver. You raise an eyebrow. He rows faster. You return to your task, driving stakes deeper, weaving tighter. It's hard work, but not thankless. Every woven fence strengthens the edge. Every packed patch of lake muck makes the garden more stable. You're not just feeding your plants, you're holding the world together with your hands. There's a story you remember, half bedtime tale, half warning. It's about a farmer who neglected his chinampa edges, grew lazy, let the borders soften. Then, one rainy season, his entire garden floated off. They found him weeks later, standing in a canoe, weeping over a single surviving pepper plant that clung to the corner of a now drifting raft. You think of this story every time your shoulders ache. Every time the muck clings and the reeds fight back. You don't want to be that guy. You want your chinampa, rooted, strong, humming with life, and it does hum. As you work, the soil makes small sounds. The slap of reeds, the soft suck of muck, the drip of water off willow leaves. Together, they create a quiet, rhythm and earthy heartbeat. You listen to it, hum along with it. It tells you when the soil is strong, when the water's too high, when something beneath the roots is shifting. And sometimes it tells stories. You hear the hush of your grandmother's voice as she laid the first reed mats on her plot, weaving them tight with fingers stained dark from the lake. You hear your father's quiet grunts as he drove willow stakes into a new corner, eyes squinting at the rising sun. You hear the laughter of children racing canoes down narrow canals, shouting bean-related insults at each other. You step back and admire your handiwork. Borders reinforced. Stakes firm, reeds woven tight as a fisherman's net. The chinampa looks more solid now, less like an island and more like a promise. You wash your hands in the canal, letting the mud swirl away. The water is cool, brackish, alive. You look down and see tiny fish darting through your fingers, unbothered. One bumps your thumb like a polite hello. You whisper back, thanks for the company. As you pack up your tools, you pause one last time at the far corner of the plot, the softest, most vulnerable point. You kneel. Press your hand flat against the soil. You hold me up, you whisper. I'll hold you together. A breeze stirs the willow. A corn leaf brushes your shoulder. The garden breathes, and for a moment, you're not floating. You're home. It's market day. You wake up earlier than the sun this time. The stars still scattered across the ink blue sky like someone spilled ground maize across a table. The moon hangs low and fat, quietly approving of your ambition. You wrap your blanket tight, tug on your sandals, and light a small torch of twisted bark. The air smells like damp earth, wood smoke, and that odd mix of excitement and exhaustion that always tags along on trading days. Your canoe is already half loaded. You packed it last night with bundles of beans, tied squash, and rows of corn stalks standing tall and dramatic, like they're auditioning for something. You even tucked in a few fresh flowers because let us be honest, store beans deserve a bit of flair. You push off quietly from the dock, the paddles slipping into the water with that soft schlup sound you've grown to love. Ahead, the canal stretches into shadow, flanked by sleeping chinampas and drowsy awot trees. Every now and then, you pass another canoe, ghosting through the mist like a dream. You nod to each other, silent acknowledgement. Early risers, swamp siblings, keepers of floating soil. The city looms ahead Tenochtitlan, heart of the empire, the navel of the lake. By the time you reach the central canal, the sky has begun to stain orange, and the edges of the world sharpen. The market's already stirring. You can hear the distant clatter of baskets, the bark of a dog, the high-pitched bargaining of someone trying to get chili peppers for half price at dawn. Bold. You steer your canoe into the designated landing zone. Lined with stone steps and patrolled by a man who takes his title as canoe coordinator a bit too seriously. He inspects your bundles like you might be smuggling jaguar cubs. You raise an eyebrow. "Just beans," you mutter. "Very well behaved." He doesn't laugh, but he lets you through. The market is already pulsing. You slip into your regular stall space between a honey seller and a woman who deals in obsidian combs shaped like animal faces. She's humming. You like her? You lay out your goods. Beans stacked in woven pouches, squash lined up by size like obedient dogs, corn laid out in ceremonial rows. It's not fancy, but it's tidy, and tidy sells. Soon, the flow begins. A woman with a baby strapped to her back examines your squash with the suspicious eye of someone who's seen too many underperforming vegetables. You offer her a taste of roasted seed. She nods, buys two, and mutters something about her sister's cooking being inferior. You silently wish the squash luck in its new home. Next, a pair of wide-eyed boys approach, clearly sent by their family to negotiate bean prices. You love this game. You want the good beans or the excellent beans? You ask. One points at the darkest pouch. Those, they look like moon rocks. Ah, those are the beans of confidence. Eat them, and you'll be brave enough to speak in front of your crush. The other boy elbows his brother. A deal is made. The beans are sold. Not long after, an old man arrives, stooped, sun-spotted, with hands like tree bark. He doesn't speak, just lifts a cornstalk, smells it, nods. He drops a bundle of woven rope at your feet. Barter. You accept without a word. Some trades don't need speech. Historians still argue about how sophisticated the Aztec market system really was. Some believe it operated like a modern city economy, regulated, organized, built on supply and demand. Others think it was a more communal affair, deeply rooted in reciprocity and ritual. You suspect both are true. There are rules, yes, but there's also a rhythm, a pulse. You feel it now. The woman with obsidian combs slides one toward you during a lull. It's shaped like a frog. Trade you for a handful of beans. You laugh. That comb better whisper compliments. It croaks poetry. Deal. You slip the frog dash comb into your hair, where it rests like a strange crown, and she grins. For the next hour, you sell nearly every squash in your inventory. Coincidence? You don't think so? Market chatter swirls around you, gossip about the emperor's latest decree. Rumors of a traveling poet who can mimic the sound of rain, debates about which canal has the tastiest ducks. Someone tries to sell you dried lizard feet as a fertility charm. You politely decline. A young girl approaches next, holding a bundle of flowers so large it threatens to swallow her whole. She shyly offers you 2 marigolds in exchange for 1 cob of corn. Her mother watches from a distance, pretending not to watch. You nod solemnly, hand over the corn. The girl beams. You tuck 1 marigold behind your ear, the other into your shirt collar. Very fashionable, your neighbor says. Like a harvest priest who got lost on the way to a party. You grin. That's exactly the look I'm going for. By midday, your canoe is light. Oh, you sit behind your stall and nibble on tamales bought with a small pouch of dry beans. They're soft, filled with squash blossom and a hint of chili. You lean back against a tree, chewing slowly. Eyes half closed as the breeze wafts the scent of roasted cacao and ground maize through the air. You hear a whisper of music, flutes and drums from across the plaza. Maybe a ritual dance or a small procession. The sound is distant but grounding. You picture your garden as you left it this morning. Dew clinging to bean leaves, squash sprawled like a lazy sunbather, corn standing tall in its post-muck confidence. You think of the words you whispered before you left. Grow well while I'm gone. Silly, maybe. But you meant it. Because selling food here isn't just business, it's story. Every cob of corn is a retelling of sun and soil. Every squash carries a whisper of the lake. Every bean was once touched by your fingers, shaped by your breath, your songs, your stubborn belief that plants grow better when they're loved. And now they've found new homes. You pack up your few unsold items, one oddly round squash, two bean pouches, a single corn cob that just refused to be chosen. You place them back in the canoe with the care of a librarian returning rare scrolls to a shelf. As you drift away from the dock, the noise of the market softens behind you. The city grows small again. The canals widen, the trees return. And you paddle home through water dappled with late afternoon sun, your body tired but light, your mind already whispering to the garden. Guess what we traded for today? The beans, if they're listening, are probably jealous. You return home with fingers stained by squash sap, a frog-shaped comb in your hair, and a canoe that now feels strangely empty without the weight of 100 vegetables silently judging your paddling skills. The Chinampa greets you like it always does, softly, without fanfare. The willows rustle, the reeds sway. And somewhere in the far corner, a cornstalk leans just slightly farther than it did when you left this morning. Either it's growing rapidly or it's nosy. You suspect both. You unload the leftovers with carry-over oddly round squash, 2 bags of beans, and a corn cob with more self-esteem than flavor. You place them near the storage baskets where they can rest and dream of their nearly glorious destinies. Then you walk the garden slowly, letting your eyes trace each plant, each vine, each sun-warmed leaf. You miss them today. This is the time of day when everything feels held, suspended. The sun dips just enough to soften the shadows, and the lake reflects the sky in lazy ripples. The garden is quiet, but not silent. Birds chirp, sleepy things from the trees. Insects hum. Somewhere, a duck makes that ridiculous wheezy laugh you pretend not to find hilarious. You crouch beside the beans and check for signs of mischief. None but one of them has wrapped its tendrils around a different cornstalk than you intended. You blink. You weren't there this morning. The bean vine, predictably, offers no explanation. You sigh. Just be nice to each other. No tugging. It's around now that you remember what else today is. Not just market day. It's not just realize the dash beans dash have dash a dash mine dash of dash their dash own day, but Festival Eve. Tomorrow, the farmers down the canal will gather by the shrine for flowers, burn sweet sap, sing songs that haven't changed in generations. It's the ritual to bless the soil, to thank the plants, to remind the earth that you're trying your best not to mess things up. You check your garden's shrine area, a small clearing marked by 3 smooth stones and a circle of marigolds. It's humble, but intentional. You sweep it clean with a branch broom. Pluck a few new blossoms from the squash vines and place them gently around the circle. You hum as you work, the melody familiar, soothing, half lullaby, half prayer. That's a phrase your grandmother used to say every year at this time. Feed the earth before it hungers. Sing to it before it forgets your voice. Historians still argue whether these agricultural festivals were primarily spiritual or practical. Some say they were about aligning with the agricultural calendar, appeasing deities of maize and rain. Others think they were simply a way to organize labor and renew community ties. But when you sit here now, cross-legged in your own little sanctuary of soil and water, those theories feel too small. This is not just planning. This is poetry. You light a stick of resin sap incense and let it smolder at the edge of the stone. The smoke curls upward like a lazy spirit, winding through the marigolds and into the evening air. You whisper a few words, thanks, hopes, the occasional apology for stepping on that one vine by accident last week. Then you remember, music. You duck into the canoe and pull out your instrumenta flute carved from river reed patched with beeswax, humble as anything you own. You play a simple tune, one passed down barely more than a breath with notes. The plants lean in. At least, that's how it feels. The leaves seem to shift. The air warms slightly. The earth listens. You finish your song and sit still for a while, watching the light fade. Bats flicker through the air now, chasing bugs with erratic grace. The frogs have resumed their concert, less chaotic than this morning, more orchestral. You hum along to their rhythm. Then, just before full darkness settles, you do something small but sacred. You take a single bean from your pouch, dark, glossy, perfectly overland, planted in the barest corner of your chinampa. No ceremony, no speech, just a quiet promise to the soil. Here's to next season. The festival tomorrow will be louder, brighter, full of fire and laughter and slightly overconfident dancing. But tonight is yours. A farmer's private ritual. You eat dinner by moonlight, roasted squash with a smear of honey, flatbread, and a handful of the same beans you grow and grow and grow. It's not fancy, but it tastes like gratitude. You sleep early, stretched out on your mat beneath a mosquito net made from woven reeds. The garden breathes beside you. The chinampa rocks gently, almost imperceptibly, with the pulse of the lake. The trees whisper, and you dream not of empire, or gold, or warbud of corn leaves rustling in the wind. Of bean vines curling around your fingers, of squash blossoms opening slowly in the morning light. In the dream, everything grows. You wake to the sound of drums, low, steady, echoing across the water like the heartbeat of something vast and old. Festival day. The sky is still pale with morning mist, but already the air carries that electric warmth that says something's coming. You stretch beneath your reed canopy, rub sleep from your eyes, and breathe in the scent of wood smoke and marigolds. The chinampa feels different this morning. Not just alive, but alert. Like the plants know today is for them. The corn stands straighter. The squash blossoms have opened wider. Even the beans seem to hum with quiet vanity. You start the day by bathing. Not just a quick splash, but a proper lake wash up to your shoulders in the cool canal water. You scrub with clay and herbs mildly abrasive, faintly minty, enough to make you smell like someone who respects their squash. Across the canal, your neighbor is already singing as she braids her hair. Her voice is thin but cheerful. You wave, she waves back with a handful of chili peppers. You dress in your best work tunic, with indigo patched lovingly at the elbows. A sash of woven red and yellow wraps around your waist, and you tuck a sprig of marigold into the fold. The frog comb, still perched proudly in your hair. Obviously. You gather your offerings next. 3 perfect corn cobs, a small bundle of beans tied with a corn husk ribbon, and 1 gloriously shaped squash that looks like it's been weightlifting in secret. You hesitate at the last moment and add a folded tamale, still warm from the fire. You suspect the earth has a soft spot for tamales. Who doesn't? The shrine is in fair raised platform at the junction of several chinampas, shaded by willow branches and painted with chalky blue symbols. When you arrive, others are already there, some kneeling, some singing, a few just standing with eyes closed, breathing. You join them, placing your offerings with the rest piles of maize, carved gourds, woven mats, tiny clay animals, and even a painted duck egg that someone clearly put effort into. The ceremony begins slowly. First, the silence. The priest steps forward, not a high priest, just an elder farmer with ashes-smudged hands and a voice like old roots. He says nothing at first, just looks around, at the earth, the water, the sky. And then he speaks. He thanks the lake for her patience, the sun for his generosity, the earth for her stubbornness. He thanks the trees for holding the land, the frogs for their weather reports, the wind for its music. And yes, even the mosquitoes get a nod for persistence, if nothing else. Then come the blessings. A woman steps forward with a bowl of flower water and dips a bundle of herbs. She sprinkles everyone gently, muttering a chant half lost in the wind. You close your eyes as the water hits your face. Sweet, slightly spicy. You feel strangely awake. And now the music. Flutes and drums, steady and rising. Not quite danceable, but enough to make your fingers twitch. You sway. Everyone sways. The air feels heavier now, full of pollen and rhythm. A child runs forward and places a beetle on the altar. Everyone laughs. It's not a grand ceremony. No gold, no elaborate masks, no blood. This isn't the Emperor's festival. It's the farmer's version, quiet, sincere, and a little silly. And honestly, you prefer it that way. Historians still argue whether these smaller local festivals were purely religious or more social excuses to swap seeds. Show off crops, flirt over roasted squash. Probably both. Because after the final chant fades and the priest steps back, the real fun begins. There's food. So much food. Stews bubbling in clay pots. Tortillas stacked like tiny edible scrolls. Squash flowers stuffed with cheese. Beans mashed with chili and lime. Someone hands you a roasted maize cake, still steaming. You take a bite and nearly weep. It tastes like gratitude and slightly too much salt. There's music. Children run wild, spinning in circles until they collapse in dizzy heaps. Teens form a circle and start a stomping rhythm that's half dance, half dare. The elders sit in the shade, drinking something strong and definitely not just corn water. You spend the afternoon floating between laughter and lightness, heart warm and belly full. You trade a bag of dried beans for a painted gourd bowl. Someone compliments your frog comb. You see the corn cob you offered earlier now perched in the shrine, crowned with a feather. By mid-afternoon, the sun burns hot and sleepy. You lie on a reed mat near the canal's edge, watching dragonflies dart like tiny, impatient gods. Someone plays a slow flute tune, nearby lazy and spiraling. You hum along, fingers tracing the woven pattern of your sash. And then, just as you're about to drift into a post-feast nap, a ripple in the water catches your eye. A canoe, small, painted. Approaching slowly. It's not from your side of the lake. The design is different, bright reds and spirals, unfamiliar in style. The paddler is young, wearing bracelets of twisted copper. She doesn't speak at first, just nods and gestures toward the crowd. You sit up. More canoes follow. 5, 10, maybe 20. All strangers, all from farther across the lake, different chinampas, different dialects, same dirt under their nails. They come bearing gifts, rare seeds, fish dried in unfamiliar spices, maize in strange colors. One even has blue beans. You blink. Are those real? The young woman grins. You want to trade? Absolutely. The rest of the day becomes a blur of exchange. You give away your last squash. You receive a pouch of sunflower seeds. You taste fermented cactus for the first time and immediately regret it. You laugh a lot. These moments, this mingling, this messy, joyous collision of farmers from all over are the veins of the Chinampa world. Trade happens at market, yes, but connection happens here. Under willows, over bowls of beans, with music and jokes and shared calluses. You learn a new word for marigold. You hear a story about a Chinampa that sank and came back. You dance with someone who claims her corn only grows when she sings to it in dreams. Historians often underestimate the role of these gatherings. They see festivals as decorative side notes in the grand ledger of empire. But you know better. These moments are the system. They're how techniques spread, how trust is built, how seeds, literal and metaphorical, are passed from hand to hand. As the sun dips and people begin packing up, you find yourself holding a tiny bundle of something new. A folded corn husk wrapped around a handful of black beans and a clay charm shaped like a jaguar paw. You ask the young woman, "What's this for?" She shrugs. "Luck, or maybe breakfast." You place it in your canoe with quiet reverence. The journey home is slower, the paddles softer. The Chinampas blur in the golden light. Your garden appears again, waiting patiently. You step ashore and the corn rustles a welcome. The squash sighs. The beans, of course, have tangled themselves in new and ridiculous directions. You place your new seeds beside the shrine. Tomorrow, you'll plant them. Tonight, you just sit, tired and full, watching the stars appear one by one. The earth feels closer somehow, like it's been listening all along. You wake up later than usual. Not lazy late, just Tate. It's a kind of late that comes after a day full of laughter, music, and too many tamales. Your bones creak slightly as you sit up on your mat, stretching your arms wide, sunlight already poking through the woven wall of your hut. The chinampa is quiet this morning, but not in a sleepy way. It's more like a stage between acts, the plants catching their breath, the soil letting its voice settle after yesterday's chorus of festival chants and feet. You step outside and inhale deeply. The air smells like cool mud, early squash, and the faintest trace of burnt flower petals. Today is for tending, for watching, for listening. You grab your tools basket, reed rake, and a small bone knife with a handle polished smooth by generations of calloused hands and begin your slow loop around the garden. The corn greets you first. It always does. Tall, proud leaves rustling with an opinion about everything. You walk between the rows, fingers brushing each stalk as you go. The tassels are full and golden, heavy with pollen. You pluck one gently and sprinkle it over a neighboring plant like fairy dust with agricultural benefits. You move on to the squash. Their vines are sprawling now, greedy for space and sun. One particularly ambitious tendril has climbed up a willow root and now dangles like a lazy jungle snake. You pause to admire it. "You've got nerve," you whisper. The vine says nothing, but it doesn't move either. You gently untangle it and redirect it toward a bare patch of soil. The beans are next, naturally. Always the troublemakers. You crouch low, checking for beetles and mildew. A few leaves are spotty, so you pinch them off, tossing them into your compost basket. Then you do something that's both a habit and a ritual. You talk to them. "Doing all right?" You ask. They don't answer, obviously, but you swear the leaves quiver just a bit. Or maybe it's the breeze. Maybe you lean in. "I brought new cousins from the festival. Blue beans. Thought you might want to meet them." One tendril curls. You laugh. "Don't be jealous. You're still the favorite." Historians still argue whether Aztec farmers literally believed plants could hear and respond, or whether all that talking was just metaphor, a way to focus attention, to observe more closely. But standing here, covered in leaf dust, whispering to legumes, you're not sure it matters. Talking makes you notice, and noticing makes things grow. You spend the next hour clearing debris, trimming, adjusting. The chinampa is a living puzzle, constantly shifting. A little more sun here, a little less water there. It's not about control, it's about conversation. Around midday, the clouds begin to gather. Not dark, angry ones, just the slow, puffy kind that drift in like old relatives coming for lunch. You hear thunder in the distance, soft and theatrical, and smile. Rain's coming. You gather the tools, make sure the new seeds are covered, and light a small incense stick near the shrine, just a little thank you for the incoming drink. When the rain arrives, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It starts as mist, then soft drops, then a steady patter that turns the air cool and the soil fragrant. You sit beneath the awning of your hut, knees hugged to your chest, watching your floating garden soak it all in. And that's when it happens. The thing you weren't expecting. The ducks return. 3 of them, waddling up from the canal like they own the place, shaking water from their feathers and quacking loudly at your compost pile. You haven't seen them in weeks. They used to visit, daily snacking on bugs, fertilizing generously, squabbling over corn scraps. Then, one day, they disappeared, off to another chinampa, or maybe a duck conference. Who knows? But now, they're back. One of them waddles right up to your foot and stares. You stare back. You want beans. You ask. It quacks. You toss a few. The duck gobbles them down, then stares again, like it expected salsa too. You laugh. With the rain falling, the duck strutting, and the chinampa gleaming wet and green, the whole world feels briefly perfect. You remember something your aunt used to say? If the ducks return, your soil is ready. You don't know if that's a proverb or just her personal theory, but either way it feels like a blessing. After the rain, everything smells sharper, like the earth has been rinsed and reset. You walk barefoot through the garden, mud squishing between your toes, the air warm and steaming. Drops cling to every leaf, every flower, like tiny beads of light. You kneel by the bare patch you cleared earlier and press your finger into the soil. Soft, loose, ready? You take the blue beans from their pouch, small, dark, with a shimmer-like polished stone and plant them one by one. You space them out like honored guests, whispering to each one, grow strong, grow weird. Make the other beans jealous. A breeze rustles the leaves. You swear the original bean plants sigh in resignation. You finish the planting, water the patch gently with your gourd dipper, and mark the spot with a small painted stone, one of the jaguar paw charms you received at the festival. It seems appropriate. These are fierce little beans. Later, as the sun returns in that golden post-rain glow that makes the whole world look like it's been filtered through honey, you prepare dinner, squash mash with ground chili flatbread with wild greens, and you guessed it, a handful of beans. You eat slowly, barefoot, seated on the edge of the canal with your legs dangling over the water. Dragonflies buzz. Frogs test out a new call that sounds suspiciously like someone trying to sing with a cold. You think about how much your chinampa has changed in just one season. How it's grown more complex, more confident. How you've grown with it. You're not just feeding plants anymore. You're feeding a whole tiny world. Ducks, frogs, bugs, trees, soil microbes you can't even see. And in return, it's feeding you. Not just with food, but with rhythm, with story. With the quiet kind of joy that sneaks up when your hands are dirty and your beans are behaving. You lean back, let your eyes drift shut, and feel the chinampa rock beneath you, ever so slightly. Like a cradle for grown-ups who still talk to plants. You wake to a familiar sound. Bees, not angry, swarming bees. These are the gentle kind, polite, professional. Bees with a schedule. You open one eye and see them already at work, moving from squash blossom to squash blossom like commuters on a very fragrant train line. You stretch, yawn, and mutter a lazy greeting to the nearest one. It ignores you, obviously, but continues its dance. You take the hint. Time to get up. Today isn't for planting or harvesting. Today is for something quieter. Learning. You pack a small pouch with dried corn and roasted pumpkin seeds. Sling a reed water flask over your shoulder and step into your canoe. Your neighbor gives you a wave and points east, where the morning sun burns through low mist. She's teaching today, she calls. Bring your smart ears. She, in this case, is the old woman who lives near the Eastern Causeway. No one knows exactly how old she is. Some say she remembers when the first chinampa sprouted. Others claim she once married a tree, then divorced it because it snored. Whatever the truth, she knows things. You paddle slowly, letting the canal carry you, watching the reflections of trees ripple and dissolve beneath your boat. A heron watches you from the reeds, its neck tucked into a graceful S, like it's writing poetry with posture. By the time you arrive, the teacher is already seated beneath a woven canopy. A half circle of farmers surrounds her, some young, some old, all leaning in like sunflowers to the voice of wisdom. You sit, cross-legged, and nibble on a pumpkin seed as she begins. Today's lesson, pest management. Or, as she puts it, how to keep your beans from being eaten by bean-hungry freeloaders. She speaks slowly, in rhythms that feel like rainfall. You listen as she lists the names of bugs, some real, some potentially invented. There's the sky beetle, the whistle grub, and the dreaded squash snuggler, which apparently bores into fruit and cuddles there until it ruins everything. You raise your hand. How do you stop that one? Love your plants harder than the bug does, she says with a grin. Also, pepper ash. Lots of it. You nod solemnly, unsure if that's metaphor or farming advice. She passes around samples leaves with chew marks, squash with hidden tunnels, even a dried caterpillar that looks like it's mid-apology. Everyone touches, smells, mutters theories. One young boy insists that talking to your plants keeps pests away because bugs hate compliments. The teacher considers this. Well, don't we all? Historians still argue whether Aztec farming practices like pest control were purely observational or guided by deeper ecological knowledge. Some say the methods were trial and error. Others believe they were part of a broader spiritual understanding of balance-maintaining harmony, not dominance. Sitting here, surrounded by soil-stained hands and serious discussions about leaf mold, you're starting to believe in both. After pests, the topic shifts to weather. How do you read the clouds? She asks. A man near you squints at the sky. If it looks like a snake, it rains. If it looks like a snake eating the sun, really rains. Everyone chuckles, but the teacher nods. Shapes have meanings, but so do smells. The wind, the frogs. When they start singing at sunset, you've got 2 days. 2 days until what? Someone asks, she shrugs. That's the fun part. You grin. The next lesson is composting. Not glamorous, but essential. You learn how to mix fish scraps with leaf rot. How to layer corn husks and duck droppings for maximum richness. There's an entire sidebar on what not to include, like old sandals, which someone apparently tried once. It didn't go well. You make a note. No sandals in the soil. After the formal teaching ends, people linger. Questions are asked. Stories shared. One man describes how his Chinampa soil sings before rain. Another claims he once saw a bean plant twist away from a jealous vine. Someone offers a theory that squash plants secretly enjoy being complimented in rhyme. You decide to test that later. Lunch is shared pouches of tamales, roasted nuts, strips of spiced cactus. You trade your dried corn for a chili paste that makes your ears itch. Worth it. Then comes something unexpected. The teacher pulls out a small bundle wrapped in woven cloth. Inside, tiny carved figurines, each one shaped like a plant. Corn, beans, squash. She passes them around, asking each person to choose one. You pick the bean, obviously. She looks at you and smiles. You've got patience. That's good. What's this for? You ask. To remind you, she says, that you're not just growing food, you're growing time. You nod, though the meaning settles slowly, like compost. On the canoe ride back, you replay her words in your mind. Not just growing food, growing time. You glance at the small bean carving in your palm, smooth and warm from handling. Time in your garden does feel different. It's measured in sprouts, in leaf-wilting afternoons, in the slow curl of tendrils around poles. It isn't minutes or hours. It's moments of change-tiny, plant-paced revolutions. Back on your Chinampa, you walk the rows with new eyes. You spot signs of the day's lesson. A squash leaf beginning to curl, a beetle too bold, a patch of compost you forgot to turn. You adjust. Whisper a compliment in rhyme to the squash. It seems pleased. Or maybe you're just hopeful. You place the carved bean at the foot of your shrine next to the jaguar paw charm and the blue seed marker. A growing collection of reminders. Of lessons. Of stories. As the sun sets, you sit by the water's edge and listen not just for frogs or ducks, but for the quieter sounds. The soil shifting, leaves drinking. The soft exhale of roots. You're not just feeding a Chinampa anymore. You're feeding your mind. And somehow, that makes the beans taste even better. The Chinampa remembers, and now it's growing its own stories. The next morning, something's off. It's not a bad feeling, exactly just a nudge, a shift. Like when a drum beat changes by half a beat and the dancers don't notice, but your feet do. You roll out of your mat, splash water on your face, and step out into the soft dawn haze, already searching. The chinampa is quiet. Still, you walk between the rose corn, squash, beans. Everything looks fine, more than fine. The blue beans have sprouted, delicate shoots pushing confidently from the soil like they've always belonged here. The ducks are snoozing. The frogs are warming up their vocal cords. And yet, you keep walking. It's not until you reach the far edge past the willows. Behind the compost mound, near the oldest awot tree that you see it. A gap, a small patch of earth, too round, too smooth. No plants, no weeds. Just a circle of absence. It wasn't there before. You crouch, poke at it gently. The soil is soft, too soft. Something has been digging here. You glance around. No paw prints. No scratch marks. Just that eerie neatness, like the earth tidied itself for an event and then forgot to invite you. You sit cross-legged, arms resting on your knees, and stare at the patch. It stares back. It's probably just a burrowing animal, a mole, a rodent, a duck with secrets. But something about the shape, the symmetry, the silence. It feels older than rodents. It feels like a question. You lean closer. The dirt smells normal wet, rich, alive. But underneath that, something faint. Metallic, stone-like. You dig gently, just enough to disturb the surface. Your fingers hit something hard. You stop. You don't pull it out. Not yet. Instead, you cover it again, sit back, and breathe. There's a decision here, and it isn't just yours. This garden is shared, and you've learned by now that every root, every vine, every beetle has a vote. So you wait. Historians still argue whether ancient chinampas were ever used for ritual burial, for shrines, or even for hiding sacred objects. Most agree they were purely agricultural. But every once in a while, someone finds something that doesn't quite belong, carved idol. A stone disc, a hollow gourd sealed with pitch. The scholars call them outliers. The farmers call them reasons to tread carefully. By late morning, curiosity wins. You return with your smallest digging tool, a curved obsidian blade, usually reserved for delicate root work. You kneel again and slowly cut around the hard shape. It's a box. Not a grand one. No gold, no jewels. Just a small, palm-sized cube made of clay, etched with spirals and lines that look more decorative than readable. There's no lid, no seam. Just a solid, sealed thing. You turn it in your hands. It's heavier than it looks. You shake it gently. Nothing rattles. You bring it to the shrine and place it beside your other treasures bean carving, jaguar charm, blue seed marker. You sit cross-legged again and say softly, "Welcome. We'll figure you out later." Later comes quicker than expected. That evening, as the sun dips low and the frogs begin their night choir, your neighbor arrives by canoe. She has brought you a small gift pouch of ground chili mixed with lime and saltand. You offer her roasted squash in return. She notices the box. She stares, then whistles. "That's old. How old? Old like?" "It was there, before, you, thought, this, garden, old." You tell her how you found it. She nods, chewing her squash slowly. "I've heard of these," she says. "My grandfather used to talk about them. Said they were memory boxes." "What do you mean? Like journals?" She shrugs. "He said if you listened hard enough, they'd tell you what used to grow here. Who grew it? What the soil remembers." You raise an eyebrow. "So, dirt, gossip." She grins. "Exactly." That night, you place the box under your mat, close to your head, just in case. You sleep lightly, half hoping for dreams of ancient gardeners whispering bean secrets. Instead, you dream of water. Dark, still, endless. and something just below the surface, watching. You wake with the box still in place, cool against your palm. The next morning, you take it to the elders near the Eastern Causeway, same group who gathers for lessons, trading techniques, and the occasional heated debate about whether ducks really fertilize better after chili-based diets. They pass the box around in silence. Finally, the oldest among them, man whose fingers are so wrinkled they resemble sun-dried roots, speaks. "This is Chinampa memory," he says. "You don't open it. You plant it. You blink. Plant it," he nods. In a place that's hungry for roots, you think of the patch where you found it still smooth, still unsettled. That afternoon, you return there. You dig a little deeper this time, clearing a neat hole. You lower the box in slowly, cover it gently, and place your hand over the mound. Then you whisper. A thank you, a welcome, a promise to listen. The next few days pass with no signs. The garden grows as usual. The ducks resume their meddling. The squash spreads. The beans remain smug. But by the fifth morning, something's changed. A vine has appeared. Thin, green, unfamiliar. Its leaves are shaped like stars. It doesn't match anything else in your garden. You watch it for a while, then bring water, mulch, and one of your favorite songs. Historians wouldn't believe this. They'd call it coincidence. Misidentified seed. A fluke, but you know better. The Chinampa remembers, and now it's growing its own stories. You check on the star-leafed vine first thing every morning now. It's grown fast, too fast, honestly. One day, it's a wiggly little green thread. The next, it distraped itself halfway up a corn stalk and started curling toward your storage hut like it's got business there. The leaves are still star-shaped, soft-edged but sharp-veined. And there's a faint reddish hue to the stems that none of your other plants have. You crouch beside it, tilt your head. I didn't plant you, you remind it. The vine, as usual, doesn't care. You consider pulling it out just to be safe. But then you remember what the elder said. Plant it in a place that's hungry for roots. You did that, and now the earth has offered. This, a plant with no name and a vibe that says ancient cousin of the chili pepper, but with secrets. So, instead of pulling it, you watch. And as you watch, something else shifts. You begin to notice things you hadn't before. Not just in the vine, but all around your Chinampa. The corn, for example, light's tassels are ripening at a pace you don't quite expect. You've counted the days, and it's early. Not by much, but enough to raise one eyebrow. The squash blossoms open wider in the mornings, stay open longer, and your bean plants. They've started growing in spirals that are, how do you put this, artistic sleet slash. One of them has wrapped around its pole in a perfect spiral that looks like something a bored sculptor would carve into sandstone. It's subtle, but undeniable. You walk the Chinampa slowly, rake dragging behind you, and feel it. A kind of hum beneath your feet. Not literal, not magical. It's the feeling you get when something is moving in the background, like music behind a closed door. Historians still debate whether ancient Aztecs believed plants could listen or respond to human activity beyond the usual watering and feeding. Some think that talking and singing was ritualistic, a way to show respect. Others believe it was a kind of training, teaching plants to remember patterns, cycles, feelings. That last idea sounds wild until you stand here in your own garden and start seeing it happen, because the plants are remembering. Or maybe they're just mimicking. Or maybe the garden is just becoming more you. Whatever it is, it deepens. One afternoon, you find a beetle you've never seen before, black with bright orange dots, like someone sprinkled chili flakes on its back. It sits politely on a squash leaf, legs twitching. You don't kill it, you just watch, and it watches back. You make a deal with it. Don't eat the flower, and you can stay. It stays. The flower remains untouched. Later, you whisper your compost recipe aloud while turning the pile. Not because you need to, tea, because it feels like someone's listening. And when you return the next day, the pile is hotter than usual, decaying, faster, richer in smell. Coincidence? Maybe. Then the dreams begin. You don't usually remember your dreams, but now they come vivid, slow, full of sound. In one, you walk through a chinampa, much larger than yours, rows upon rows of corn that towers over your head, vines that stretch across the water like bridges. You hear voices not speaking, exactly, more like chanting. Low, rhythmic. It's the same pattern you use when patting down soil. The same hum you whistle when shelling beans. You wake up with dirt under your fingernails and can't remember why. In another dream, you're underwater, not drowning, just floating, watching roots dangle above you like kelp. Something glows faintly in the mud below. A seed, a memory. You wake with the urge to plant something new, even though the season's nearly over. So you do. You find a bare patch near the shrine, dig a neat hole, and plant one of the strange seeds you got at the festival. You don't even know what it is, but it feels right. That night, the wind shifts. Cooler, lighter. The kind of wind that announces seasonal change, not loudly, but with certainty. The chinampa feels it too. The squash tightens its leaves. The beans begin curling their last tendrils. The corn turns its silks toward the sky like an offering. And in the middle of it all, the mystery vine, the one with the star-shaped leaves, flowers. The bloom is small, almost shy. Pale purple, with a yellow throat and a faint shimmer in moonlight. You crouch beside it and whisper, "Well, hello." It smells faintly of mint and memory. You don't touch it. You just watch. You wonder if this is what the old farmers meant when they talked about the old roots. Not genetics, not technique, but the feeling that some things in the garden don't come from youth, they come through you. And now that you've listened, they've begun to respond. You spend the next few days preparing for the change of season. You harvest what's ready: beans in bunches, squash in curls, corn that practically plucks itself. You dry what needs drying, roast what needs roasting, and whisper thank yous to everything you pull from the ground. You save seeds, carefully placing them in clay bowls lined with corn husks. Each bowl labeled not with writing, but with patterns of seeds pressed into the clay. It's a kind of memory map. This one from the beans that curled like dancers. This one from the squash that tasted like honey. This one from the blue beans that grew bold and stubborn. You place the star bean's first fallen leaf into its own bowl. Not because it's useful, but because it feels sacred. On the last night before the first frost, you light a small fire in your garden center. You sit beside it with your knees tucked up, cloak wrapped around your shoulders, watching the flames flicker orange across the faces of your plants. One by one, you greet them. Thank you, corn. Thank you, squash. Thank you, beans. And then, softly, thank you, stranger. The wind shifts again, just slightly. A rustle in the leaves, a sigh in the soil, and you feel it's something old, deep, gentle, stirring beneath your feet. Your chinampa remembers. Your garden responds. And as you lie down that night, map pulled close to the fire's dying warmth, you dream again of roots, of rivers, of seeds that whisper in the dark. You wake smiling, because this garden is no longer just yours. It never was. The air changes before the light does. You feel it on your skin, cooler, drier, a breeze with more bite than before. Not unfriendly, just firm. A reminder. The season is shifting, even if the sun still lingers a little longer than expected. Your chinampa is quieter now. Not still, not lifeless, just thoughtful. Like the garden knows it's time to slow down. The beans no longer reach. The squash vines have stopped their slow crawl. The corn, now stripped of most of its cobs, stands like tall, patient ghosts. You walk through it each morning like visiting old friends. Touch the dried husks, run your fingers along curling leaves. Offer a soft joke here, a whispered thanks there. You're not growing anything new right now. You're remembering, which, as it turns out, is part of the work too. And memory is thick this time of year, not just yours. The whole village buzzes with preparation for the days of memory, the time when families build little altars in their homes and on the chinampas themselves. They decorate with marigolds, candles, clay bowls of tamales, even carved little figures to represent the people who came before. Your neighbor has already begun hers. You pass her chinampa and spot tiny figurines dancing around a squash, and a particularly stern-looking corn doll with a tiny mustache. You wave, she waves back. He looked like that in real life, she says. Always judging my tortillas. You laugh, paddle on. Your own altar is simpler. A woven mat. A clay bowl of beans cooked the old way with just ash and salt. A carved squash figure representing your grandmother. She wasn't a talker, but she had a stare that could fix broken tools from across the garden. You place the figure gently beside a little bundle of blue beans, descendants of that first festival gift. They've done well this season. Strong vines, reliable bloomers. Mildly arrogant, but you respect that. You light a candle. The flame flickers, windless. You sit beside the altar as night falls, the garden bathed in silver moonlight and flickering orange. You remember stories of stubborn beans, runaway squash, corn that grew in forbidden places. Your grandfather swore he once saw a maize plant grow through stone. Because it didn't know it couldn't, he'd say. Historians still argue whether chinampas held spiritual meaning beyond farming, whether the land itself was seen as sacred or merely useful. But sitting here, watching candlelight play across marigolds and ears of corn dressed in woven ribbons, you know the answer isn't either war, it's both. These plots float, yes, but they also root deep into memory, into family, into identity. The next day, you help a neighbor repair her garden bed. The canal wall has slumped, water pushing in where it shouldn't. You haul woven reeds, pat mud, and brace it with old willow sticks. As you work, she tells you a story about her great-uncle who once fell asleep in his canoe, floated into another family's chinampa, and woke up in the middle of someone else's wedding. You pause. What did he do? Married the bride's cousin. Worked out, actually. You both laugh, hands deep in mud, rebuilding the edge of the world one handful at a time. By afternoon, the chinampa's rhythm slows again. The ducks are quieter. The frogs sing less and listen more. You visit the mystery vine. It's fading now. Its flower, once sharp and bright, has withered into a curled brown pod. You cup it in your palm. Side are seeds small, hard, the color of dried river clay. You don't open it. Not yet. You place it in your pouch. A promise for another season. Back at your altar, you add one more item. A tiny reed canoe carved years ago when you were still learning to paddle. It's crooked, uneven, the work of uncertain hands, but it feels right here, beside the blue beans and the silent squash woman. That evening, the community gathers on a wide chinampa near the center of the lake, a floating memory field. Families arrive in canoes, carrying lanterns and songs. Cute float in slowly, paddle barely touching the water. The air smells of smoke and masa. Someone's playing a flute-soft, wandering notes that wind between the reeds like a lazy snake. Children run barefoot along the chinampa's edge, throwing marigold petals into the water, and everywhere altars, some simple, some ornate, all glowing. You find your space, place your offering bowl down, light your candles. Someone leans over and compliments your squash carving. You smile. She's very strict. The night becomes a gentle tide of memory. Stories float all aloud, whispered, sung. Some are funny, some quiet, all true or true enough. You hear one about a chinampa that once grew in two places at once. Another about a bean plant that bloomed only when insulted. Someone sings a song that makes the candles tremble. Then comes the call for silence. Not rigid silence, just listening. The flute stops, the voices hush. You hear the water lap against the chinampas. A frog lets out a single sleepy croak. A child sneezes. Then nothing. And in that nothing, you feel it again. The hum. Like before, low, root deep. Not a sound, a knowing. You're not alone. You've never been alone. Every plant you've tended, every whisper to a vine, every footstep between corn rows, every seed you've saved and planted and mourned, that's all been part of this. Not just a garden, a lineage. You close your eyes. Let it settle. Let it grow. When the candles burn low and people begin to paddle home, you stay a little longer. Just enough to say one more thank you. One more goodbye. One more whisper to the beans. Your chinampa waits. So does the next season. You wake before the sun, not out of duty or habit, or because the ducks are making a racket again. No, today you rise because something in your chest says it's time. Not for planting, not for harvesting. For remembering, yes, but also for offering. You tie your cloak, step out barefoot, and let the early chill kiss your skin. The lake is still, a polished mirror broken only by drifting petals from last night's ceremony. The scent of marigold and wood smoke still hangs in the air, like a farewell that lingers just a little longer than necessary. Your chinampa greets you with its usual quiet strength. The corn stalks, now mostly stripped, lean like elders in conversation. The squash vines lie curled like cats in the sun. The beans still holding on, still refusing to give in. Of course they are. You walk the rows slowly, checking, touching, whispering. You carry nothing today, no rake, no blade, no baskets. Just the mystery seed pod in your pocket. The one from the star-shaped vine. The one that flowered just once and then disappeared like a comet into memory. You hold it in your palm. It's light, but not empty. There's weight to memory. You walk to the place where the memory box was planted. The soil there has always felt different, looser, warmer, as if something below is still breathing. You kneel, press the pod gently into the soil, and cover it with a handful of earth mixed with crushed corn husks and ground ash. Your offering, and then you speak. Not a prayer, not a speech, just a string of thank yous. To the earth, to the water, to the roots, to the sky, to the whisper that brought you here, and to the voice that slowly, patiently, gently became your own. You sit for a long time afterward, letting the sun catch up with you, letting the light unfold across the chinampa like golden lace. You don't know what will grow from that seed. It might be nothing. It might be something. But it was never really about what grows, was it? It was about the care, the noticing, the jokes you told your beans, the morning songs for your squash, the respectful nods to the ducks, even when they were stealing your compost. It was about becoming part of something bigger, older, stranger, and somehow more alive. You spend the day walking, not far, just along the edges of the canals. Past other chinampa, some tidy, some wild, some abandoned, but still pulsing quietly beneath the weeds. You wave to neighbors, trade jokes, share stories. One person swears their corn danced during last night's flute song. Another says their beans have started speaking Nahuatl, though they might just be dehydrated. You nod, listen, laugh. Everything feels slower today, looser, like the whole lake is stretching after a long nap. In the late afternoon, you sit beneath the old awot tree. It's the one that leans a little too far, like it's always about to fall in, but never quite does. You lie back on the ground and watch the leaves shift against the sky, and then you hear it again. That low hum, the garden's memory. But this time, it's joined by something else, not a sound, a pulse, a breath. From the soil, from the water, from the wind rustling through dry bean pods. You close your eyes when you feel it. Every story you've told, every joke, every whisper, every mistake, every seed. The memory isn't just under the soil, it's you, and you are part of the garden now. Not just as a gardener, but as a story, a root, a seed. A breath of water floating forever between mud and light. You lie there as the sun sets, shadows lengthening, air cooling. You don't move for a long time. Eventually, the ducks come looking for you. They quack, once, loudly. You open one eye. Don't get used to this, you mutter. They quack again. You get up slowly, smile, and walk home with the ducks waddling behind you like tiny feathered guards. The Chinampa breathes with you. The stars begin to appear. And somewhere beneath the soil, a seed waits. Not for instructions, just for time, just for remembering, just for the right breath of wind. Now, as the moon rises over the water and the frogs begin their gentle chorus again, you feel everything slow. Your feet are tucked under a woven blanket. Your arms are warm from the last of the sun. The Chinampa sleeps, and so do the ducks. Even the beans, ever stubborn, have closed their tiny leaves for the night. The world feels quieter now, softer, like it's holding its breath not in fear, but in peace. You let your breathing match it. Slow inhale, easy exhale. There's nothing left to do tonight. Nothing to plan, nothing to fix, nothing to check. Your garden is full, your soil is rich, your story has grown. The stars blink gently overhead, and the wind barely there stirs the edge of your blanket like a whispered lullaby. You think, for just a moment, about tomorrow, about new seeds, about whether the mystery vine will bloom again. But the thought floats away as quickly as it came, like a petal drifting across the lake. You are still. The garden is still. And all the voices that have ever whispered to the beans, sung to the squash, or laughed at the ducks, they're still here too, curled gently into the soil, resting with you. So close your eyes now. Let the Chinampa carry you. Float gently between the stories and the stars, and sleep.